me bring back in my think tank. First of all, let's talk about the big issue here, which is the drinking. They were drinking that night. The testimony seems pretty clear. She's a mean drunk, her mom says. What does that mean for this case, that she's a mean drunk? Does that mean that she maybe instigated some sort of altercation here that got physical and he ends up killing her? Is that what prosecutors have to argue here?
I think that was the picture that was painted when I listened to the mother, when she said her daughter, when she drank, she was the biggest, baddest, meanest thing there is. So that sort of tells you that any arguments that may have occurred probably escalated beyond just the, verbal, and maybe got physical sometimes.
Does this testimony help prosecutors?
Yeah, I mean, it shows a motive that she may have been really drunk and her blood alcohol level was pretty high and they found drugs in her, so maybe that's what happened. She got into argument and went after him and he snapped.
Does the defense have an opportunity here at all because of the picture that's being painted of Sarah Colucci, who's the victim here? She's the one who's dead.
I think it works both ways. Obviously, it can be a good setup to say, look, a confrontation happened and it just went too far, but the catalyst was the fact that the drinking and the drugs were going on. But at the same time, from a defense standpoint, I think it's easy to say that she had some depression issues. She had reached out to her doctor, to our psychiatrist, I believe, that day. It was the anniversary of her first marriage, her first husband killing himself in a very violent way. In conjunction with the drinking and the drugs, she might have had a psychotic break, and it can be played that way.
So how do you determine what it really means for this jury? Because the defense can argue suicide, or are they going to argue accident, or are they going to leave it in the gray area, right? I mean, usually when someone commits suicide, there's a note or there's something else that is done. It's not just like, oh, yeah, it was a bad day, it's the anniversary of something. Do you think the defense has to stay with accident, or can they actually say, because of this volatile relationship, it was suicide? It could have been suicide.
Well, she could have accidentally hung herself. Maybe she thought about it, started, and then maybe by accident she ended up hanging herself. I mean, that is possible. But remember, the burden of proof is on the state of South Carolina, prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he intentionally murdered her. So as long as they create some kind of doubt that they can't show the reason she died, maybe it was suicide, maybe it was accident, if there's not enough proof that he actually did it and had an intention to do it, that's not guilty. That's the burden.
From my perspective, Lieutenant Colonel, I look at this and I think the jury has to be convinced with the forensic evidence that it's not consistent with accident or suicide, regardless of what the deputy coroner says or does not say in this case, that these marks, these furrows on her neck are only consistent with being strangled, right? And if that's the case, then all these other facts fit into place, the volatile relationship.
I would have been interested in seeing some sort of weight-bearing tests done on that necklace. All we saw, I think, a couple of days ago was the lawyer, Savage, destroying, and that was deplorable. I've never seen anything like that in my life, to have someone destroy evidence right there in the court without being admonished at all. But I would like to have seen some sort of test that they could bring forth to say, hey, this necklace could withstand this amount of pressure before it breaks. And I think that would give the jury something to work with, because as of now, it looks like the necklace couldn't stand that much pressure.
Right.
That it would snap before you could actually use it as a ligature to choke someone to death.
Yeah, and so is this case about the relationship? Is this case about the forensics?
I think it's both, as most cases are. It's people say it's like a puzzle, and you have to bring in the different pieces. And so those are big puzzle pieces, obviously, the forensics. But I think that the state of their relationship, and actually to the state of where she was psychologically, is very important to the case.
Should there be a bunch of experts testifying in this case? Is this a case, coming in to talk about, he's got a whole bunch of different stories. She could be depressed. Does the jury need that to get a clear picture, or does the defense just say, let's leave it muddied as possible? Because muddy's good, right?
Yeah, muddy's usually pretty good for the defense if the state can't get the theory straight, and it may feed into the defense theory. But experts testifying about her being depressed, a psychiatrist, again, that works both ways for both sides. Dr. Collins testified for the defense, as a forensic pathologist. She's great, I know her, and she calls it as she sees it, and that was important for the defense to raise that because the state's coroner said something a little bit different. And
State's coroner says nothing. That's the main problem. I don't know if this is a homicide, suicide, or an accident. And, you know, the only way it could be suicide or an accident, and I ask everyone every night this, it's got to be the hose, right? If it's not the hose, there's no way this is a suicide or accident. You guys, you can disagree if you disagree, but does anyone disagree with me on that?
No.
No one, except the deputy coroner. Except the deputy coroner. It's so frustrating.